The telegram arrived on a scorching August afternoon in 1883, and Violet Morrison knew, before opening it, that her life was about to shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. She stood on the dusty main street of Lovelock, Nevada, having just finished her shift at the general store where she had worked for the past 3 years since her mother passed. The paper trembled in her hands as she read the words once, twice, 3 times, each reading making the reality more concrete and more unbearable. Her father had sold the ranch, the home where she had been born 22 years ago, where her mother had taught her to bake bread and sew quilts, where she had learned to ride horses before she could properly read. Gone. Sold to pay gambling debts in San Francisco, where her father had relocated after her mother's death, leaving Violet to fend for herself in this small Nevada town. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could. He had not asked, had not even written to tell her of his financial troubles, had simply signed away the deed to the 200-acre property 15 miles outside of town, the place she had dreamed of returning to once she saved enough money, the place she still considered home even though she had been forced to rent a small room above the seamstress shop these past years. Violet crumpled the telegram in her fist and felt hot tears spill down her cheeks despite her best efforts to maintain composure. Several townspeople glanced her way with curious expressions, but she could not bring herself to care about propriety or appearances. She walked blindly down the street, her vision blurred, her heart breaking with each step. She found herself at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert, sage brush stretching toward distant mountains. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold and amber, beautiful and merciless. She sank onto a wooden bench outside the closed telegraph office and let herself cry properly, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "Miss Morrison." The voice was deep and hesitant, tinged with concern. Violet looked up through her tears to see Isaiah Butler standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. She knew him by sight, as everyone in Lovelock knew everyone else, but they had never spoken more than polite greetings. He was a cowboy who worked on one of the larger cattle operations in the area, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. She guessed him to be perhaps 25 or 26, though she had never asked. "I apologize for intruding," he said, his brown eyes genuinely worried. "I was passing by and saw you were distressed. Is there anything I can do to help?" Violet wiped at her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed to be seen in such a state by a virtual stranger. "No, thank you. I am fine." "You do not look fine, if you will pardon me saying so." He took a small step closer but maintained proper distance. "Bad news." Something about his gentle tone, the authentic concern in his expression, broke through her defenses. Maybe it was because he was essentially a stranger, someone who did not know her history, someone who would not gossip about her troubles over Sunday dinner. Or maybe it was simply that she was so tired of carrying everything alone. "My father sold my family's ranch," she said, her voice cracking. "Without telling me, without asking. It was my home, and now it belongs to someone else." Isaiah's expression darkened with understanding and sympathy. He moved closer and sat on the far edge of the bench, giving her space but offering silent companionship. "That is a terrible thing for a father to do. I am truly sorry." "I should have expected it," Violet said bitterly. "He left town the moment my mother was buried, chasing cards and whiskey in San Francisco. But I hoped he would keep the land. It was hers before they married. Her father built that house with his own hands, and now some stranger owns it." They sat in silence for a moment, the desert wind warm and dry against their faces. Finally, Isaiah spoke again. "The Morrison Ranch, 15 miles west of here, near Willow Creek." Violet looked at him in surprise. "You know it." "I know of it. Beautiful property, good water, decent grazing land." He turned his hat over in his hands, studying it intently. "If I may ask, who purchased it?" The telegram did not say. "Just that the sale was final, and I should remove any personal belongings I wished to keep within 30 days. Fresh tears threatened, and she blinked them back furiously. "I do not even know if the new owner will let me inside to collect my mother's things." Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he stood and placed his hat back on his head. "Miss Morrison, I believe things may not be as hopeless as they seem right now. Will you allow me to look into this matter? I might be able to learn more about the situation." Violet studied him, confused by his interest but too exhausted to question it deeply. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," he said with a small smile. "Sometimes it is easier to help a stranger than to navigate the complications of helping friends and family. Besides, I do not like seeing injustice done, especially to good people." "You do not know if I am good people," Violet pointed out, but she felt a tiny spark of something, hope perhaps, or just gratitude that someone cared enough to offer help. "I have seen you working at the general store," Isaiah said. "You are always patient with the children, kind to the older folks who take forever to count out their coins. You help Mrs. Chen carry her purchases even though she never asks. That tells me what I need to know." Violet felt her cheeks flush. She had not realized anyone noticed such small acts. "Thank you, Mr. Butler. I appreciate your kindness, though I do not know what you could possibly do at this point." "Let me try," he said simply. "Where are you staying?" "Above the seamstress shop, room 3. I will come by tomorrow evening if I learn anything." He tipped his hat to her and walked away. His stride confident and purposeful, Violet watched him go, feeling slightly less alone than she had moments before. She stood and brushed the dust from her skirt, steeling herself to return to her small rented room and face another evening of grief and uncertainty. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the ranch with painful clarity. The wide porch where she and her mother had shelled peas on summer evenings. The kitchen with its big cast-iron stove where they had baked bread every Saturday. The bedroom she had occupied until her mother's death, with windows facing east to catch the sunrise. The barn where her favorite horse, Copper, had lived until she had been forced to sell him to pay for her mother's medicine. Every memory was precious and sharp as broken glass. The next day dragged interminably. Violet measured out flour and sugar, wrapped purchases in brown paper, made change, and smiled at customers with a cheerfulness she did not feel. Her mind kept wandering to Isaiah Butler and his promise to help, though she could not imagine what he thought he could accomplish. The sale was final. Her father had every legal right to sell property that was in his name, regardless of the emotional cost to his daughter. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Violet climbed the narrow stairs to her room with heavy steps. She had just poured water into her wash basin when a knock sounded at her door. Isaiah Butler stood in the hallway, and Violet's breath caught at the expression on his face. He looked nervous, hopeful, and determined all at once. "Miss Morrison, may I speak with you? It is important." She stepped back to let him in, conscious of propriety but too curious to care much. He remained near the door, clearly aware of the impropriety himself, but driven by whatever news he carried. "I learned who bought your ranch," he said without preamble. "It was me." Violet stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I bought your family's property from your father's lawyer in San Francisco." He spoke quickly, as if afraid she would interrupt. When I heard yesterday what had happened, I remembered that I had been looking at that exact property. I had saved money for years, wanting to start my own operation instead of working for someone else. The ranch came on the market 2 weeks ago, and I purchased it through my own lawyer, not knowing the circumstances of the sale. Violet's mind reeled. Of all the possible buyers, of all the people in Nevada and beyond, the man who had comforted her yesterday owned her childhood home. I do not understand. Why are you telling me this? Isaiah reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. His hand shook slightly as he held it out to her. Because I should not own something that was taken from you unjustly. Your father had the legal right to sell, but that does not make it right. This is the deed, Miss Morrison. It is yours. Violet took the paper automatically, not fully processing his words. She unfolded it and saw her name, written in official legal script. Violet Catherine Morrison, owner of 200 acres and all structures thereon. She read it 3 times, just as she had read the telegram, but this time each reading brought disbelief rather than despair. I do not understand, she whispered. This cannot be real. It is real, Isaiah said gently. I had my lawyer draw up the transfer this morning and rode to the county seat to have it registered officially. The ranch is yours, free and clear. No debt, no strings attached. But you spent your savings, Violet said, finally looking up from the deed to meet his eyes. You said you saved for years. You cannot just give this to me. It makes no sense. It makes perfect sense to me. He moved slightly closer, his expression earnest. Money can be earned again. Savings can be rebuilt. But home, real home, the place where your history lives, that is irreplaceable. I could not live there knowing I was walking on your mother's floors, sleeping under your family's roof, while you had nothing. I could not be that man. Tears streamed down Violet's face again, but these were different from yesterday's tears. These carried shock and gratitude and an overwhelming sense of being seen, truly seen by another person. Mr. Butler, I do not have the words to thank you. I cannot ever repay you. This is too much. I am not asking for repayment, he said. I am asking only that you let me call on you properly, if you are willing, that is. I would like to know you better, Miss Morrison. Yesterday, when I saw you crying, something in my chest twisted up tight. And when I realized I had unknowingly contributed to your pain, I knew I had to make it right. But more than that, I wanted to be the one to make it right. Does that make sense? Violet clutched the deed to her chest, her heart racing. You are giving me my home back and asking permission to court me at the same time. I know the timing is strange, Isaiah admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. But I am not a man who believes in hiding my intentions. I find you beautiful and kind and strong. I would like the chance to see if you might come to think well of me too. But there is no obligation. I want you to know that. The ranch is yours regardless of your answer. She studied him, this cowboy who had appeared in her life like something from a fairy tale, offering miracles with work-roughened hands. He was handsome, she realized, with strong features and kind eyes. But more than that, he had proven himself to be a man of principle and compassion, qualities rarer than gold in her experience. Yes, she said softly. You may call on me, Mr. Butler. I would like that very much. His face broke into a wide smile, transforming him from handsome to stunning. Would you call me Isaiah? I think we can dispense with formalities at this point. Isaiah, she said, testing the name on her tongue. And you should call me Violet. Violet, he repeated, and the way he said her name made something warm bloom in her chest. Would you like to ride out to the ranch tomorrow? I could borrow a buggy, make it comfortable for you. I expect you want to see the place, make sure everything is as you remember. I would love that, Violet said. Then a thought occurred to her and she frowned. But Isaiah, where will you go? You spent your savings on the ranch because you needed a place of your own. I cannot take that from you." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking sheepish. "I will continue renting the room at the boarding house where I have been staying. It is not luxurious, but it suffices. Eventually, I will save enough to buy another property. It will take time, but I am patient." "That is not acceptable," Violet said firmly. An idea was forming, audacious and improper and absolutely perfect. "The ranch house has 4 bedrooms. I cannot possibly use all that space myself. You should stay in one of the rooms. Just until you find another property," she added quickly, seeing his shocked expression. "It would be a business arrangement. You could help with the property maintenance in exchange for room and board. Everything would be proper and above board." "Violet, I cannot do that. Your reputation would be destroyed if people knew you were living alone with an unmarried man." "Then we will not be alone," Violet said, her mind racing. "Mrs. Henderson, the widow who lives on Lincoln Street, she is always saying how lonely she gets in her big house since her children moved away. I could offer her the second guest room. She would serve as chaperone, and I know she would appreciate the companionship. She is a wonderful cook too, better than I am. It would benefit everyone." Isaiah stared at her, clearly trying to find a flaw in her logic. Finally, he shook his head with a laugh. "You are remarkable, do you know that? Most women in your position would be content to accept the gift and send me on my way. But you are trying to solve my problems even while your own life has just been turned upside down." "You gave me back my home," Violet said simply. "It is too large for one person anyway. This way, everyone benefits. You have a place to stay while you rebuild your savings. Mrs. Henderson has company and purpose. And I have help maintaining the property and protection, which I will need living so far from town. It is practical." "It is also incredibly kind," Isaiah said softly. "If you are certain, and if Mrs. Henderson agrees, then yes. I accept your offer. Thank you, Violet." They stood looking at each other for a long moment, the deed still clutched in Violet's hands, the future suddenly bright and full of possibility. Finally, Isaiah cleared his throat and stepped back toward the door. "I should go before people start talking," he said. "I will come by at 8 tomorrow morning with the buggy. Wear comfortable clothes for the ride." After he left, Violet sank onto her bed and stared at the deed until the words blurred. 24 hours ago, she had been bereft and betrayed. Now she owned her childhood home and had been offered the courtship of a good man. Life, she thought, could change in the span of a heartbeat. The ride to the ranch the next morning was pleasant despite the heat. Isaiah had indeed borrowed a buggy, a well-sprung vehicle that handled the rough road with relative ease. They talked as they traveled, sharing stories of their lives with the ease of old friends rather than new acquaintances. Isaiah told her about growing up in Wyoming, the youngest of 5 brothers. His father had been a rancher, but with so many sons, there had not been enough land to divide among them all. He had come to Nevada at 19, looking for opportunities to build his own future. For the past 7 years, he had worked for the Granger Ranch, saving every spare dollar, learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the business of running a successful operation. "I am not afraid of hard work," he said, guiding the horses around a particularly deep rut. "But I want to work for myself, build something that is mine. I know that must sound prideful." "It sounds ambitious," Violet corrected. "There is nothing wrong with wanting to make your own way. I feel the same. After my mother died, several people suggested I should move to San Francisco to live with my father, be a proper dependent daughter. But I could not do it. I needed to prove I could survive on my own." "And you have," Isaiah said, glancing at her with admiration. "That takes courage, especially for a woman in this world. It is not easy." No, Violet agreed. But neither is being a cowboy with dreams of ownership when everyone tells you to be content with wages. They smiled at each other, recognizing kindred spirits. When the ranch came into view, Violet's breath caught in her throat. The house stood where it always had, white paint gleaming in the sunshine, the porch wrapping around the front just as she remembered. The barn needed some repair work. She could see from a distance, but the corrals were intact. The windmill near the well turned lazily in the breeze, a familiar creaking sound that brought tears to her eyes. "Home," she whispered. Isaiah brought the buggy to a stop in front of the house and helped her down. His hands were warm and steady at her waist, and she found herself reluctant to step away. But propriety demanded it, so she moved toward the porch steps with eager anticipation. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled of dust and disuse, but everything was as she remembered. The furniture was still there, the kitchen table where her family had shared thousands of meals, the rocking chair her grandmother had used. Her father must have sold the property fully furnished, too lazy or too indifferent to arrange for the furniture to be moved. Violet walked through the room slowly, touching familiar surfaces, remembering. The house was smaller than her memories had painted it, but no less precious. This was where she belonged. These walls held her history, her mother's love, the best parts of her childhood. She found Isaiah in the kitchen, examining the stove with a professional eye. "It needs some cleaning, but it is solid," he said. "The whole house is well built. Your grandfather knew what he was doing." "He was a good man," Violet said. "I wish he had lived long enough to see me grow up." "He died when I was 7. And your mother's mother, she passed before I was born, so it was just the 3 of us until it was 2 and then just me." She ran her hand along the kitchen counter, dust coming away on her fingers. "I want to move back as soon as possible. I know it needs cleaning and repairs, but I cannot bear to spend another night in that tiny rented room now that this is mine again." "We can make that happen," Isaiah said. "If you are serious about the arrangement you proposed yesterday, I can be here by tomorrow evening. We could ask Mrs. Henderson today, and if she agrees, we could have everything ready by the weekend. I know several men from the ranch who would help with repairs in exchange for a good meal." "Then let us go ask her right now," Violet said decisively. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman of 60 with silver hair and a merry disposition, was thrilled by the invitation. "Oh, my dear girl, I would absolutely love to," she said, clasping Violet's hands in her own. "I have been so dreadfully lonely since my Robert passed last year, and living out in the country again would be wonderful. I grew up on a farm, you know. I have missed it terribly." With Mrs. Henderson secured as chaperone, the next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Violet gave notice at the general store, though her employer insisted she could return whenever she wished. She packed her few belongings and said goodbye to the seamstress who had rented her the room. Isaiah recruited help from his fellow cowboys, and they descended on the ranch like a benevolent swarm, fixing fence posts, patching the barn roof, repairing the corral gates. Violet and Mrs. Henderson cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows, beating rugs, scrubbing floors. The older woman proved to be exactly the companion Violet needed, cheerful and energetic, full of stories and practical wisdom. She treated Isaiah with maternal affection, clearly approving of the young man's character and his obvious regard for Violet. "He is a good one, dear Mrs. Henderson said as they hung fresh curtains in the parlor. "The way he looks at you, like you are the sunrise and sunset combined, and giving you back your home like he did, that is the mark of a truly fine man." "I know," Violet said softly, glancing out the window to where Isaiah was working on the barn with 3 other men. Even from a distance, she could pick him out easily, his tall frame and confident movements distinctive. "I am grateful beyond words." "Grateful is a start, Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. "But I think you are feeling more than gratitude, am I right?" Violet felt her cheeks heat. "Is it too soon? I have only known him for 5 days. The heart does not operate on a schedule, dear girl. Sometimes you just know. My Robert proposed after knowing me for 2 weeks, and we had 43 happy years together before the Lord called him home. When it is right, it is right." By the following Sunday, the ranch was livable and welcoming. Violet, Isaiah, and Mrs. Henderson sat down to their first dinner together in the kitchen, and Violet felt such a profound sense of rightness that she had to blink back tears. This was what home was supposed to feel like. Not lonely isolation, but shared warmth and companionship. Isaiah established a routine quickly. He rose before dawn to handle the ranch chores, then rode to the Granger ranch to put in his workday there. He returned in the evenings to help with whatever needed doing at the Morrison place, never complaining about the long hours. On Sundays, he took Violet on proper chaperoned outings with Mrs. Henderson, accompanying them on picnics or rides into town for church services. During these outings, Violet learned more about the man who had changed her life so dramatically. Isaiah was thoughtful and curious, interested in everything from literature to politics to the best techniques for canning vegetables. He listened when she talked, truly listened, asking questions and remembering details she mentioned. He made her laugh with stories of mishaps on the ranch, and he was unfailingly respectful while still making his romantic interest clear. 3 weeks after moving to the ranch, Violet stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isaiah joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Beautiful evening," he said. "It is." Violet turned to look at him instead of the sunset. "Isaiah, can I ask you something? Anything? That day you found me crying, you said you were passing by. But the telegraph office is not on the way to anywhere. Were you looking for me?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I had been thinking about asking permission to call on you for weeks," he admitted. "I used to find excuses to come to the general store just to see you. That day I had worked up my courage to finally speak to you, and when I saw you were upset, I almost walked away. I thought you would not want a stranger bothering you, but I could not leave you there crying alone." "I am glad you did not walk away," Violet said softly. "So am I." He turned to face her fully, taking her hand carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She did not. "Violet, I know it has only been a short time, but I need you to know my intentions. I am courting you because I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you, here on this land, raising cattle and horses and, God willing, a family. I am not a rich man, and it will take time to rebuild my savings, but I am hardworking and steady. I will provide for you and protect you and cherish you for as long as I live. I am not proposing yet. I know it is too soon for that, but I wanted you to know where this is heading for me." Violet's heart hammered in her chest. She squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses earned through years of honest labor. "I need you to know something too. When you gave me the deed to this ranch, you gave me more than property. You gave me hope. You showed me that good men exist, that kindness and integrity are real and not just fairy tale concepts. I am falling in love with you, Isaiah Butler. I probably started falling the moment you sat down on that bench and asked how you could help." His eyes lit up with joy so pure it made her breath catch. "You mean that, truly?" "I do not say things I do not mean," she replied. "Then may I kiss you?" The question was respectful, hopeful, tender. "Yes," Violet whispered. He cupped her face gently in his work-roughened hands and lowered his lips to hers with exquisite care, as if she were something precious and fragile. The kiss was sweet and chaste and perfect, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I am going to marry you, Violet Morrison," Isaiah said with quiet certainty. "I know," she replied, "and I am going to say yes." Mrs. Henderson, watching from the kitchen window, smiled to herself and went back to kneading bread dough, humming a happy tune. The summer gave way to autumn, and autumn to winter. Isaiah and Violet's courtship continued under Mrs. Henderson's benevolent supervision, each day deepening their connection. They worked side by side on the ranch, repairing fences, tending the vegetable garden, planning for the future. Isaiah began purchasing cattle, a few head at a time as his savings slowly rebuilt, with a plan to establish a proper herd by spring. In November, on a clear cold morning with the first snow dusting the distant mountains, Isaiah took Violet riding to a high point on the property where they could see for miles in every direction. He had packed a lunch, and they sat on a blanket, eating sandwiches and watching eagles soar overhead. "Violet," he said, setting down his food and turning to her with serious intensity. "I know we agreed I would wait longer, but I cannot. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. You are my first thought in the morning and my last thought at night. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me?" He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond, modest but lovely. Violet felt tears spill over, but these were tears of joy. "Yes," she said emphatically. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Isaiah. You are the best man I have ever known, and I want nothing more than to be your wife." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her with all the pent-up longing of months of careful courtship. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear it." "You already have," she replied. They were married in Lovelock's small church on a bright December morning in 1883. Mrs. Henderson cried happily throughout the ceremony, and half the town attended, genuinely pleased to see Violet's fortunes so dramatically reversed. The story of how Isaiah had bought back her childhood home and given her the deed had spread through the community, growing more romantic with each retelling, and public opinion had firmly established them as Lovelock's favorite couple. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Violet wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit. Isaiah wore a new suit, the first he had ever owned, and looked so handsome that Violet's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. They exchanged vows with voices that shook with emotion, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaiah kissed her with such tender passion that several ladies in the congregation fanned themselves vigorously. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn and food contributed by dozens of neighbors. There was music and dancing and laughter that lasted well into the evening. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Isaiah and Violet stood together on their porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. "Mrs. Butler," Isaiah said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "How does that sound?" "Perfect," Violet replied, leaning into him. "Everything is perfect, Mrs. Henderson, true to form, had moved her things to a small cottage in town the day before the wedding, insisting the newlyweds needed their privacy. But she remained a frequent visitor and dear friend, often coming to help with canning or quilting or simply to share a cup of tea and gossip. The first year of marriage was everything Violet had dreamed and more. She and Isaiah worked together to build up the ranch, their herd growing steadily, their property improving month by month. They learned each other's rhythms and habits, negotiating the small compromises and adjustments that any marriage requires, and found that they fit together as naturally as two pieces of a puzzle. Isaiah was patient and kind, passionate and attentive. He made her laugh every day and supported her ambitions for the ranch as enthusiastically as his own. Violet discovered depths of love and desire she had not known existed, and she went to sleep each night in her husband's arms feeling blessed beyond measure. In the spring of 1885, Violet realized she was pregnant. She told Isaiah on a warm April evening as they sat on the porch swing he had installed for her, watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. For a moment, Isaiah simply stared at her, his expression stunned. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that startled the chickens in the yard. He swept her up carefully, mindful of her condition, and spun her around gently. "We are having a baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Violet, we are having a baby. When? October, I think, maybe early November. I am going to be a father." He set her down carefully, his hands shaking slightly as he cupped her face. "You have made me the happiest man alive." "I love you so much." "I love you too," she said, laughing at his excitement. "You are going to be a wonderful father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Violet found the summer heat oppressive in her condition. Isaiah became even more attentive, taking over tasks he deemed too strenuous for her, fussing over her diet and rest in a way that was both endearing and occasionally exasperating. Mrs. Henderson visited weekly, bringing advice and baby clothes she had sewn, regaling Violet with stories of her own pregnancies decades earlier. On a cool October evening, as the first frost touched the land, Violet went into labor. Isaiah rode for the doctor in a panic, returning within an hour with both the physician and Mrs. Henderson, who had insisted on accompanying them. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Violet thought she could not endure another contraction. But Isaiah stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement, his own face pale with worry, when their son finally arrived in the early hours of morning, squalling lustily and healthy. Isaiah cried openly. He held the tiny boy with reverent wonder, counting fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle they had created. "He is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name him?" Violet, exhausted but elated, smiled. "I was thinking William, after your father, William Butler." Isaiah's eyes filled with fresh tears. "My father would be honored. William Butler it is. Hello, little Will. Welcome to the world." The years that followed were full and rich. Will grew into a robust, curious child with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. The ranch prospered under Isaiah and Violet's management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the area. They hired 2 full-time cowboys to help with the work, and Isaiah's reputation as a fair employer and skilled cattleman grew. In 1888, they welcomed a daughter, Emma, who had Isaiah's brown eyes and a temperament as sweet as summer honey. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they named Robert in honor of Mrs. Henderson's late husband. The older woman had become such an integral part of their lives, so beloved by them and their children, that the gesture brought her to tears. Violet's father never contacted her after selling the ranch. She heard through occasional correspondence from San Francisco acquaintances that he had lost everything to gambling and drink, eventually dying in poverty in 1890. The news saddened her, but she felt no anger anymore. In a strange way, his betrayal had led to her greatest happiness. If he had not sold the ranch, Isaiah would not have bought it, and she might never have met the man who became the love of her life. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December 1893, Isaiah and Violet hosted a large celebration at the ranch. Their home, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, was filled with friends and neighbors. The children, now 8, 5, and 3, ran through the house with other youngsters, their laughter echoing off the walls. As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Violet stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Isaiah tuck Robert into bed. He read the boy a story, doing silly voices that made their son giggle, then kissed his forehead gently. "Sleep well, little man," Isaiah said softly. He joined Violet in the hallway, and they walked together to their own bedroom, checking on Will and Emma along the way. In the privacy of their room, Isaiah pulled her into his arms. 10 years, he said wonderingly. 10 years since I married the most incredible woman in the world. 10 years since I married the man who gave me back my home and my hope, Violet replied, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You remember that first day?" Isaiah asked. "When I found you crying outside the telegraph office?" "Every detail," Violet said. "It was the worst day of my life until you made it better. You always make everything better." "That works both ways," he said, tilting her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. This ranch, our children, the respect of this community, but most of all you. Your love, your partnership, your presence beside me every day. I would give up everything else if I had to, as long as I could keep you." "That is exactly how I feel about you," Violet said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "You are my home, Isaiah. This house, this land, it is all wonderful, but you are what makes it home. You and our children." They made love that night with the tender passion of a couple who had weathered years together and only grown closer, who knew each other's bodies and hearts intimately, who had built something real and lasting through hard work and commitment and genuine love. As Violet drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, she thought about the telegram that had arrived 10 years earlier, the piece of paper that had seemed to signal the end of everything good in her life. How wrong she had been. That telegram had been the beginning, not the end. It had led her to Isaiah, to this life, to happiness she had never imagined possible. The years continued to pass in the way that happy years do, each one full of small joys and occasional challenges, all of them faced together. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Isaiah and Violet's love deepened with each passing season. Will showed early promise as a horseman. Emma had her mother's head for numbers and helped with the ranch accounts even as a young girl, and Robert was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or exploring the furthest corners of their property. Mrs. Henderson remained a constant presence in their lives until her peaceful death in 1897 at the age of 74. She passed away in her sleep, and though they mourned her loss deeply, there was comfort in knowing she had spent her final years surrounded by love and purpose. They buried her in the Lovelock Cemetery next to her husband, and Violet planted roses on her grave every spring. By 1900, as the new century dawned, the Morrison Butler Ranch, as it had become known locally, was one of the largest and most respected operations in Nevada. Will, now 15, was already showing leadership qualities and a natural gift for working with cattle. Emma, 12, had announced her intention to become a teacher, and Isaiah and Violet supported her ambitions wholeheartedly. Robert, 10, was still trying to figure out his path, but he approached life with such enthusiasm that they had no doubt he would find his way. On a summer evening in that first year of the new century, Isaiah and Violet sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sun set over land they had built together. Their hair was touched with gray now, their hands more weathered, but their eyes still lit up when they looked at each other. "You ever regret it?" Violet asked. "Giving up your savings, your chance to start your own place immediately, just to give me back my home?" Isaiah turned to her with an expression of such pure love and contentment that it took her breath away even after 17 years of marriage. "Not for one single second," he said firmly. "That decision brought me you. It brought me this life, our children, everything that matters. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "I am so grateful my father sold this place," Violet said, a statement that once would have seemed impossible. "If he had not, I would never have found you. I would never have known what real love feels like, what it means to be partners in every sense of the word. Strange how the worst betrayal of my life led to the greatest blessing." "Not so strange," Isaiah said, pulling her close. "Sometimes we have to lose what we think we want to find what we actually need. I thought I needed land and cattle and independence. I was wrong. I needed you. Everything else is just extra blessing on top of the greatest gift I ever received." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear their children's voices, arguing good-naturedly about something inconsequential, and both parents smiled. "We did good, did we not?" Violet said softly. "We did very good," Isaiah agreed. "We built something real, something that will last." "I love you, Isaiah Butler," Violet said, the words as true and necessary as the first time she had spoken them all those years ago. "I love you, Violet Butler," he replied. "Forever." The moon rose over the ranch, casting silver light across the land they had nurtured together, and in the distance, cattle lowed softly in the summer night. This was home, built on a foundation of sacrifice and generosity, grown strong through partnership and love, blessed with family and purpose. From betrayal had come redemption, from loss had come abundance, and from a chance meeting outside a telegraph office had come a love story that would be told in Lovelock, Nevada, for generations. Inside the house, Emma called out that she had made lemonade, and Robert begged his parents to tell the story again of how they met. Will rolled his eyes at his younger siblings but smiled, because he loved the story too, even though he had heard it dozens of times. Isaiah and Violet exchanged a knowing glance, rose from the porch swing hand in hand, and went inside to their children, to their life, to the home they had built together. The deed to the property might have been in Violet's name, but the ranch belonged equally to both of them, as everything did in their marriage. They had created something neither could have built alone, and it was more valuable than any amount of land or money could ever be. As they gathered around the kitchen table, the whole family together, sharing lemonade and laughter and the familiar story of a cowboy who bought a heartbroken woman's childhood home and gave it back to her, along with his heart, Violet looked at the faces she loved most in the world and felt a contentment so deep, it was almost overwhelming. This was what mattered. This was everything. And it had all started with a telegram, a stranger's kindness, and the courage to open her heart to unexpected love. The story would end here, but their lives would not. There would be more years, more challenges, more joys. Will would eventually take over the ranch with his father's guidance, building it into an even greater success. Emma would become a teacher as she dreamed, educating children in Lovelock for 40 years. Robert would discover a passion for veterinary medicine and become the first official veterinarian in their county. All 3 children would marry and have families of their own, and Isaiah and Violet would become beloved grandparents, their house always filled with the noise and chaos of multiple generations. But on this perfect summer evening in 1900, with their children gathered around them and the ranch peaceful under the stars, Everything was exactly as it should be. Violet and Isaiah had found their happily ever after, not through magic or chance, but through sacrifice, courage, and the transformative power of genuine love. And that was the greatest gift of all, more precious than any deed or property, more valuable than any amount of money could measure, a treasure that would endure long after they themselves had passed into memory and legend.